Next question comes from John DeStaso. It's on the topic of guns.
Thank you, Adam. Good evening. Earlier this year, after the mass shooting in Parkland, Florida, at the high school there, the NRA's chief executive, Wayne LaPierre, said, quoting now, "Every day, young children are being dropped off at schools that are wide open, soft targets for people bent on mass murder. It should not be easier for a madman to shoot up a school than a bank or a jewelry store or some Hollywood gala." This prompts a few questions. And so, Mr. Burns, first, do you agree with Wayne LaPierre? And would you sponsor or support the use of federal funds to help local school districts purchase guns or hire armed guards?
I agree with him that it is unfortunate that our most precious resource, our children, we take the least amount to protect as we do money or a bank or a jewelry store or something like that. Would I use federal funds to help people buy guns? No, but I think that if teachers want to arm themselves in the workplace, 100% I support that. Anybody should be allowed to arm themselves in the workplace. Even a truck driver driving over state lines should have national reciprocity. They can carry that gun with him. So, but I wouldn't use federal funds, but I think that the private corporations and companies would step up as far as helping to provide teachers with training and firearms. I would imagine that the NRA would step up. Gun companies like Sig Sauer, I think, would be happy to say that, hey, we protected schools and that we gave these as donations. So I don't think that the federal government has to provide money for these guns.
Ms. Blankenbecker.
Thank you. And, you know, I feel badly that children don't feel safe at school. Children should go to school and feel safe, and certainly that should be a priority. But you know, this is a mental health issue. It's really not a gun issue. But to answer your question, I don't think that the federal government should pay for guns in schools. I do believe, though, just like Mr. Burns, that our teachers should be allowed to be armed. You know, we need rapid response in the schools. When a shooter comes in, we don't have time to wait. And so those teachers that are comfortable with firearms, that own their own firearms, should be allowed to bring those firearms, especially when they've been trained to use those. You know, I can't imagine what it must be like to be a teacher and have to be a human shield of protection between a shooter and my students and have no way to protect myself or them. You know, certainly I think we should allow them to have mace as well, whatever it will take, so that teachers can protect themselves and their children. And I do believe we need to arm our resource officers as well.
Mr. Levinson.
Yes. The problem is we need school resource officers in strategic locations. We need the building hardened. I don't believe buying guns with federal education money is the answer. But the problem is these schools have had resource officers and they haven't been the highly trained officers that are necessary. They're often retired from other police departments when in fact they should be the most highly trained because they're the ones functioning without backup. I mean, Ann Custer has been anti-gun. She's received poor ratings from all firearms organizations. Well, let's start where we agree. We all want to protect our children, and with the proper training, some minor redesigns in schools, our children should be able to go to school safe, feel safe, and parents not have to worry once they drop their kids off at school.
Mr. Negron.
Thank you, Adam. You know, it's more than schools. It's about being able to protect yourself. You know, I'm a father of 3. And even though our children are a little bit older, you know, it's not just about schools, and we shouldn't be myopic when we talk about this stuff. You know, when you start saber rattling about being able to take stuff away from individuals that have a right to have that, I'm going to stand up in front of it. And look, we all know this. You get federal dollars, there's a string attached to those federal dollars. Nothing's ever for free. You know, we used to be told that when somebody gets something for nothing, somebody gets nothing for something. And so to use federal money to arm those teachers, I disagree with that. If they're qualified, capable, and they want to do that, I think that's their prerogative. But we have to look at the bigger picture, and is that individual that has the right to bear and carry a weapon, that still should be happening and not be infringed upon.
Mr. Belanger.
You know, our family values have kind of gone downhill. That's the core thing. We need to start getting some message to the parents, because a 16-year-old kid just don't go on the street corner and buy a gun. I'm sure if he's very resourceful and he lives in the inner city, he probably could manage that. But we're talking some of these places, these kids are getting guns from their parents' closets, from their parents' dressers, drawers. You know, it takes a parent or it takes a gun owner to lock up their weapon and be sensible. And our schools have resource officers now, a lot of them, at least I know when I grew up and my kids went to school. So those police officers have carried guns when they're on duty. Why not allow them to carry the guns in the school? I believe that. But using federal money for that, no. Less government. We don't need the government having their hands in something else.
Mr. Boulogne.
I grew up in Colebrook, New Hampshire, on the Canadian border. When I was going to high school, we brought our guns to school. I remember trying out my friend's gun in the parking lot. I wasn't shooting it, but I was aiming it around, and everybody saw it. That was not a problem. And I don't think it's gun violence so much as the culture. If you see the video games they're playing today, my nephews were playing with some video games, and they were, I wouldn't have let my children play with those video games. They were shooting up people, and then it deadens the sensitivity. They actually use these video games to train soldiers on how to shoot. And I think that it's more cultural, and yes, the teachers should be allowed to carry firearms. In Parkland, the resource officer ran like a squirrel, and I think the teachers with a firearm would back everything up. It would be the second gauntlet to prevent the school shooter from achieving success.
Croc TV.